Hope you guys are having an awesome family day. Welcome. You're watching Raptors Today. Savanna Hamilton alongside the vets, Paul Jones and Sherman Hamilton. Guys, what a heartbreaking loss. The Raptors lost last night 112-116 against the Minnesota Timberwolves. Jonesy, I really want to get your analysis and break down what happened at the end of the game there, because Pascal did have some great open looks, but give me your thoughts.
Well, it was a great look. I really liked the way the Raptors managed the end of the game. And again, this is something that Raptor fans are shaking their heads because I keep continually going back to this stat that Toronto had the number one winning percentage in games where it was one possession, plus or minus 3 with a minute to go. And they've come up short this year, and Raptor fans aren't used to that. And a lot of people will look at what happened at the end of the game. And they did a terrific job scoring, forcing a turnover. Everybody thinks you have to foul automatically. No, you don't. You can force a turnover, a bad pass. They got the turnover. They designed the play perfectly for Pascal. And if you give Pascal that shot 1,000 times, that might be the one that he's missed last night. And it happens. And everybody's going to point to that, but that's not necessarily where the game was lost in that sense. There's lots of plays. I mean, you've played, Sherm's played. You look at the one play as your last chance, but there were many chances before that to win the game, Savanna. So, that'll be the one that people will highlight, but there's a whole lot of work to be done.
Well, let me give this to Sherm then, because Sherm, as a former player yourself, was the game really lost at the final bucket, or was there multiple opportunities beforehand to seal the deal?
No one's lost at the bucket. We all know that. I mean, the casual fan will look at the last minute or so of a game and think that's what caused it. But ultimately, when you look at the game, I really thought the Raptors in two areas lost the game. In the first quarter, allowing Minnesota to get confident out there and get a bit of a rhythm. And that third quarter was disastrous for the Raptors, allowing Minnesota to shoot 75% from the floor. They had 18 points in the Raptors' paint. And what that does from a mental perspective, if you know that you can get to another team's paint, you put all kinds of physical pressure on them. You feel like you can dominate them. And when you get to the rim, the Raptors didn't have the normal resistance that they usually had. And Minnesota's confidence, you could see it growing in that third quarter. And then you end that third quarter on a 17-6 run. That bleeds into the fourth quarter, and that instills more confidence. So there are many areas in the game where the Raptors can look back and say, if we had adjusted certain things earlier, we wouldn't be looking at Pascal missing a shot to help us win. So I think it's definitely one of those situations where they should have done their work earlier and not put themselves in a position to have to rely on a last-minute bucket to help them win the game.
After the game, Coach Nurse, Lowry, and Fred shared their thoughts to the media.
I think they had a 37-point third, and we just never really recovered from there, and fighting uphill the rest of the way. Clawed our way back to give ourselves a chance, but we definitely didn't give them much resistance there when they were making their run. I think defense will carry you a little bit further in this league than your offense will. It's great that we're scoring a lot of points, but I think, the defense is going to be more steady and probably get you over the hump a little bit more. But that's just my opinion. I'm not the end-all, be-all in terms of knowing the game, but that would be my perspective on that.
Well, I mean, I don't think you're going to play all the games on exactly the sharpest, right, Doug? It's what happens. I don't know. Sometimes, back off a road trip, sometimes these are tough, right? I don't make any excuses for any of that stuff, but you got to play your way out of it, right? Somewhere during the game, you got to play your way out of it and get to some consistency. And we didn't do it till it was really late, I didn't think.
We're 3 games under 500, and we could be 6 games over 500, right? It's just that small of a, difference, right? But you just got to continue to work and continue to just push and push. And hopefully, just keep roll off, some more wins in a row. I think that's where we've missed this year is, consistent, like a consecutive win streak, like a big 5, 6, 7 game win streak. Well, we worked our butts off to get there. Pascal had a great look. The ball spun out. Like, that's something that happens, right? That's basketball. It just happens, right? It's no, keep his head up. It's a make or miss league. I don't care what happened. He missed a shot. He'll make up for it another game. We got everything we wanted in that look, right? He literally got to the front of the rim and the ball spun out. Simple as that. But it happens, and you learn from it, and you go on, and you move on, and we support P, and it's one miss, it's a loss, and now we gotta keep scrapping and crawling to get back to where we want to get.
Now, Jonesy, Norman Powell has been showing out as a starter. How does this change his role when he comes back? When OG comes back?
Well, look, if there's a guy suited to change roles in the organization, it's Norm Powell, because he the floor, and you can play Norm as one of your starters. He might be in that finishing unit as one of your best 5. So why not put him out there and get off to a good start? It depends on the matchup. It really does. But what you have to do is get Norm into a position where when he comes off the bench, he is, as he seems to find it in the starting lineup, continue to be part of the focus and the focal point on offense. He'll play his defense, and maybe that'll get him going. What you're doing maybe is cutting down on a few of the minutes to get him going at the start. But you still need to expect, prolific play from Norm, regardless of what happens.
Now, Sherm, when OG does come back, what impact or improvement do you see him contributing to the Raptors right away?
Well, there's an obvious impact defensively. And, when you talk about the Raptors, and you look at even the game that they played against Minnesota, the ability to keep people out of your paint and be physical on the perimeter, that's something they miss. And OG's numbers offensively this season have been great when you talk about his ability to knock down the corner 3, his decision-making, his ability to get on the glass. And you look at his steal percentage, he's doing a great job in terms of getting in the passing lanes with active hands. And I think when you talk about OG, there's a physicality that he brings to this team because he not only defends the perimeter, he defends those big bodies as well, and he does a good job of not giving up ground. So there's a toughness he adds. There's the ability to say, okay, individually, you can lock him in on a star player. He's not going to stop them, but he's going to make life difficult, and that's what you have to do to stars. And they really miss OG's presence consistently on the defensive end, and that's immediately what he brings back when he comes back to the lineup.
Now, Jonesy, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the Bucks, because we have to play them twice again. And the last time we saw them, they I don't want to sugarcoat it, they killed us in the paint. They killed us. So how do we make the adjustment going forward?
Well, first of all, you can't turn the ball over. I know Toronto only had 11 turnovers, but when you turn it over, it puts them in go mode. And they're a team they're a high scoring team. They're a high energy team. Some of those paint points come off quick offense and early offense, where it's not necessarily the ram it down throat, dominate inside, but they get them, through turnovers. So you can't turn it over, one. And then you've got to be better, individually. Contain guys, not have help. If there is a mismatch where there's a bigger guy, a bigger guard, a Drew Holiday, or there's a Giannis trying to post up, then you need more ball pressure. You need the double teams to come right away, and then you need to rotate. The Raptors were lucky in the last game. Drew Holiday really didn't get going, but Brook Lopez. People look at his outside shooting. You forget he's 7 feet. He's a 7-footer. He's 7 feet tall, and he doesn't forget how to do that. So you have to be diligent, really expend the energy on the defensive end, take good shots on offense, and try to shorten the game in that sense.
Listen, a 7-foot shooter is a beautiful thing to see in the game of basketball, but not when it's against us.
No.
Now, Sherm, Giannis has been very quiet MVP contributor this season. Last time we faced him, we actually made him more of a facilitator. Do you think we should just run that plan back again for this upcoming game?
Well, I think anytime you take Giannis's attention away from attacking and being at the front of your rim and 2 feet in the paint, that's a good thing. I think Giannis knows that and is going to try and buck that trend that the Raptors put him in. But, when we talk about Giannis in terms of being an MVP, listen, the guy's a victim of his own success. There's an expectation that comes with guys like these that put up numbers like this that says, all right, what else are you going to do? We get so numb to the greatness of the numbers and the consistency that we kind of say it's not good enough anymore. And who are we to be saying that, really? But I just think that he's going to be in that conversation as usual. And the Raptors are going to have to contend with him, not only in terms of keeping him out the paint, but when he becomes a facilitator and if he's attracting that second defender and he opens up the three-point line for the shooters they have spread around him, that becomes a problem. He dominated on the glass as well. This is a guy who can impact the game beyond scoring. So your challenges are there. And this is where not having a guy like OG can really hurt you, because he can do so much in terms of helping your defense along and defending that long athletic body of Giannis Antetokounmpo.
Now you can catch the game tomorrow on Sportsnet. Both listen and watch it there at 8 p.m. That's Tuesday night. Joining us today on RTX, familiar face Randy Urban, producer and host at NBA TV Canada. And new to RTX is Donovan Bennett, host and producer at Sportsnet. Donovan, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for having me. I feel like, Mama, I made it. Like, I'm finally on the show. So now my career is legit, for sure.
Oh, so flattering. So flattering. Thank you. All right, let's dive into it. So, guys, we are all hosts and producers, which is actually kind of a unique situation. So with that being in keeping in mind, we cover sports, how much of the responsibility does it fall on us to highlight Black stories in the context of the sports that we cover? Donovan, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm Black. So naturally, I just see them as stories, right? Period, right? I think you can't, if we're talking about basketball, but even if we extrapolate to other sports, you can't fully do it justice in telling the full breadth of stories that we have unless you're making sure to tell Black stories and finding a way to connect and represent the Black audience. For me, as a Black storyteller, it's something earlier in my career maybe I shied away from because I didn't want to be put in a box and pigeonholed. But now when I talk to young people who are trying to be in the shoes that you guys are in, I say, lean into it. Don't make it something you're ashamed of. Make it your superpower, because that's the experience you're bringing to a newsroom, is your lived experience, and that's an intrinsic advantage that you have. So I certainly think we can't be telling stories, and for us, Canadian stories, without talking about the diversity that we have in our country, because that's how we get to inclusion. So a Black story is just a human interest story that really deserves to be told. And specifically in Black History Month, we tell them now because we know we don't get them a lot for the other 11 months of the year. So we have to lean in and make sure we're telling them appropriately.
Yeah, great point, DJ. They are just essentially stories, and it's sort of disheartening that we're at this point that we have to, categorize things that way. But I think we have a responsibility as members of the media, because we're purveyors of information and hopefully truth. And with information, the right information, comes education. And I think education is really at the heart of this problem. Nobody is born racist. That hate is taught, prejudice is taught, intolerance is taught, not always directly, but sometimes indirectly, in how we live our lives and how we don't always stand up for what's right at all times. Now, I think the unfortunate part is that you can be educated scholastically and be completely ignorant of the problem and be completely part of the problem. And you see that in Canada, and you see that in the US as well. And so it's about the right education. So I guess the next step is navigating this disease is how do we get there? And I think we get there by listening, by being an ally, by reading, by highlighting Black stories, or stories, as DJ Bennett, actually my former colleague at the Score, has done for as long as I've known him. You were the first person that I ever saw do a Black History Month story. And that was, man, that's got to be 10, 12 years ago, and now it's, we're still doing it, but it should be more commonplace, and it should be every month of the year. And I can't believe that we're only here, but I'm thankful that I feel like we're going in the right direction.
Kind of touching on both of your points. So one, Donovan, great point that like these are not just Black stories. These are human interest stories. They shouldn't even have a skin tone associated to it. We should be just talking about them like, everyday type of thing, like everyday stories. And to your point, Randy, like, it's interesting from your perspective because, you work very closely with Open Gym and with Giants of Africa. So you do get to tell these stories on almost a regular basis. But overall, Donovan, like you mentioned, like there's 11 months of the years where it feels like we don't have the freedom to say all of the stories that we can without it being a Black History Month story. So Donovan, but overall, given this past pandemic, I'm going to call it two pandemics with BLM and George Floyd and everything that went down there. Do you think as a whole, we've seen change in the regard of telling Black stories as just regular everyday stories now?
Well, what I think we've seen is that there's an audience for these stories, right? The people who have said, oh, right, that's niche, that's too small of an audience. We're talking to a large audience. Well, no, like these stories, speaking from my own perspective, they performed very well. The documentary on the team that came out of the bubble that showed both pandemics has performed very well. Like it's gotten, rave reviews and critical acclaim. So I think the idea that we used to have that like, oh, this is only for a small subsect of the audience has been proven to not be the case. But I love the fact that you mentioned that there are two pandemics, because if we look at them, right, I think they're somewhat similar in terms of the disease, right? Like racism, we're not going to get it to zero, right? Like that's not realistic. But what we want to do is acknowledge that it's real, figure out ways that we can mitigate against it and have conversation around it moving forward, honest conversation, which is what we've done with COVID-19. And in that pandemic, we wouldn't just say, we're only going to talk about COVID-19 for 1 month, and we're going to ask all the people who have COVID-19 to find out the solutions. No, we're going to talk to the government, we're going to talk to health officials, we're going to have a holistic conversation. So to Randy's point, we all have to be a part of the solution, and it can't just be for 1 month. And so that's why I think, to your point, it is a pandemic, and why we all need to be a part of the conversation moving forward. And there are small ways as well. We use Open Gym as an example. I love the fact that Open Gym shows, Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry, not just as basketball players, but as fathers, as husbands. Because what that does is humanizes them and understands, like, yeah, I have some empathy for them, and I connect with them, even though they share some similar things with me. The fact that their skin color is different lets me know that, yeah, that I am just like they are, and they are more alike than me, than they are different. And so when they rise up and speak about how they're not treated the same, I have a reason now to understand that, because I see more of their whole human aspect in their human life. So I do think on all levels, that type of storytelling, whether intentional or not, is important.
Oh, that's well said. No, you said it all, DJ. I thought we were running low on time, so I thought we were going to get to the next topic. But, you're right. And the good thing is that right now you're seeing stories in the media where parents are doing things that the kids are not doing. So the kids are learning to be better. And I think that's just going to continue to happen the more generations come. And hopefully we can expedite, that process with telling these stories.
One thing just to close off that I found a quote is by Plato, and I thought that this was very interesting. It said, "Those who tell the stories control society." And so I think it's just as important as the stories that we're highlighting, with the perspective that it's coming from as well. So, hey guys, thank you so much for having this conversation with me on RTX today. It's always a pleasure to dive into this. I could talk for days on this type of subject, but Donovan, want to have you back as soon as possible. And Randy, always a pleasure to have you on the show. We're going to go back now to Paul Jones and Sherman Hamilton.
Sav, great segment with those two guys, and in Black History Month, and I've started to use the hashtag Black History Always. As Donovan talked about, it's more than a month, and people ask me, for example, on St. Patrick's Day, why am I not wearing green? I got my little green on, and I will say, did you wear black on Martin Luther King Day? Just it's kind of an always thing, and for me, as part of the older generation, I want to know from you, looking up ahead at people that are kind of forging the trail and paving the road. What's the view like from where you are in terms of finding your voice, using your voice, expressing your voice to try and create change?
Well, that's a great question, Jonesy, honestly, because I've seen so much change just on social media, as my generation tends to enjoy. However, I'm not trying to be ignorant or oblivious, because I understand that social media is also an echo chamber. So as much as I would love to say, oh my goodness, the grass looks so much greener on the other side going up ahead, I'm also like, or is that just what I'm seeing? I spend some time on TikTok, and I see that the younger generations, even younger than me, are posting, and they're very vocal on not just Black history or Black Lives Matter, but like a lot of social causes. However, for myself, I mean, I know that I have to continue the conversation, continue driving it, because it needs to be a regular thing. And, following that RTX conversation, I'm happy to hear that, Randy and Donovan are kind of continuously telling these stories, but it can't just have a skin tone to them. They have to be an everyday type of conversation story. It has to not be uncomfortable anymore. And I still think we're breaking that barrier a little bit. It's not as harsh as it maybe once was, but it definitely is still there.
Savanna, obviously this topic is broad, but when you look at your situation, being not only a Black woman, but a young Black woman in the media atmosphere, and that extra layer that you have to deal with. When you talk about the pandemic, as you talked about with Randy and DJ, when you add that layer as well, how much more difficult, or was it more difficult for you as you made your way in this business to kind of navigate all the pitfalls? And then you throw, being a young Black woman trying to get ahead in a business that hasn't necessarily been as accepting as we'd like it to be.
No, yeah, sure, you're right. You're saying it like right there. I'm fortunate for so many supporters, so many allies that have really helped me get to where I am today. Like, shout out to Dwayne Watson and Yosai and Gelf, even like all those people who actually at the end of the day, they believed in me and they gave me a chance to be on air. However, I will say that like even getting in the door, that is by far the hardest part. Tony Francis, our former producer that used to work here, she really believed in me. She really developed me. And she happened to be a Black woman herself. And so what I noticed is it kind of takes your own community to really empower you and lift you, because you might not find that help anywhere else. And, I did go to a school, a university that was, my program was predominantly white. And I'd like that to see that change going on in the future. But at the time I expected that. And maybe I didn't see as many opportunities within where I was at the time as I am now, but like I had to kind of work extra hard. I would say 3 times harder to make sure that I'm getting those reps, getting the opportunities to really be seen, to have my voice heard. But it's crazy because I look around the room now and I find that, it's a little lonely, because the only other Black women I know in Canada in this industry is Kayla Gray. I've talked to some other women in the industry and they've agreed that like it's not ideal. But hey guys, I appreciate you guys asking me these questions, and thank you for having the conversation. And to the viewers, thank you for listening and watching. Catch you guys next time. Thank you for watching our latest episode. Make sure you subscribe to all the Toronto Raptors social channels so that you don't miss a thing.